Hi, I'm an addict named Jeff. And let's see. The last time I did this was my 22nd. I don't know. I think it was my 22nd anniversary uh, of being clean, sober, whatever you prefer. Um, and that's been that was 2021, I believe. Um, I'm trying to think if there's in in recovery, says you sit there and you go through, and your life seems to take on these phases. Like your life is a certain way for, I don't know, 3 months, 9 months, something like that. Um, I don't know how adept we are at that thing where, says you just get into this routine, and that routine stays the same for years. I don't know. I think that most of us find that we kind of have to break up that routine. Um, However, says I think that that's a reflection of when we get into recovery, we start to change. And as we change, says we change and grow, says then eventually we kind of outgrow that phase that we were in, says we have to take on new routines, we find new things and that kind of thing. So um, I'm trying to look at my life over sections, and anyway, says I'll start. I'll go back to like the 80s when I was in my 20s. Um, I was, you know, I don't know. I think it says um, I was a silver tongued, charming bastard, man. I was. I just, I could charm my way through any. Seems like through any situation or anything like that, and um, uh, I don't, this is, and of course, and I don't know how much of that was cocaine, and I don't know how much of that was me, but since I went through a lot of cocaine in the 80s. It was the thing, everybody did it. Um, and that was kind of the way this is when I realized I was an addict. It was something we were talking about in here the other day. Um, I realized I was an addict when I started choosing, like, you know what? I says, I am not gonna miss my opportunity to get high, so fuck the rent, whatever. I'm gonna choose this, and I would and I let that thing roll out, and I got evicted a lot of times, or I just I up and left in the middle of the night. We were just saying in here a few minutes ago, I used to be the Grand Slam champion of being able to, says I would live somewhere else tomorrow. I mean, I would literally be able to move myself, get a truck, move myself overnight all by myself. Actually before my two younger kids were born. But uh it's just like the thing that I think really brought me down was the was crack. This is when crack came along. 6 months later I was in treatment. But I also I would also shirk my responsibilities on just about everything. Says I was work, says I love the thing about I was working the night shift at this company called Entech, and I was I was one of the design team and they were trying to make the best use out of their equipment. So they would have a night shift come in, and we would I'd share a computer with the guy, this is with another guy who worked days. So I remember it says it would start to get we would start to get more and more daring, says we go out at lunch on Thursday night, which was around here. Typically Thursday night was ladies' night at the bar. And so on Thursday night, we would go to lunch, and it would be like between midnight and 2 a.m., and the bars would just be screaming, and, since I remember us coming back to work and sitting there and laughing and everything like that. Well, a few weeks later, I picked up my paycheck. I went to this particular bar that we go to, and it had a window where they'd cash your check, and so I got my check cashed, and I had since I had a few, and then I left and I went to my favorite crack house, and I started getting high, and I didn't stop for like, I think it was 3 weeks. I had, since I had 3 whole weeks worth of paychecks coming in. So I just, I went and spent, and I would, and at this time too, says the thing, I think what was really characteristic of me in the crack was that I'm living in hotels. I had been divorced. I got divorced in 94, or pardon me, 84. And, I never really got my balance back, and I'm not going to sit here and point at my ex-wives or anything like that, but my first ex-wife, says I don't like her all that much. I mean, I still see her once in a while. She's just one of these people I just really don't like. I don't know what I was doing other than I knocked her up. That's all I can say about it. And I don't want to trash talk her or blame her for anything, And although once in a while she likes to make comment on my behavior when we were married and that kind of thing. And I just says, you know what? Shut the fuck up. Says, you were sitting right there with me. You did it. I saw it with mine own eyes, and I never could understand, and this seemed to happen with a lot of the women that I would get involved with and live with, be girlfriends with, that kind of a thing. One of the things was that, I don't know, they said they saw us having some kind of like a way different life than I saw. Since I mean, I just didn't see this kind of forever life or anything like that. And I usually knew, a few months in. And unfortunately, since my first wife and I weren't together that long. We didn't date that long before she got pregnant. And, her being the good Catholic girl that she is, and her mother being very, I don't know, she was persuasive Catholic that she was. It was, next thing I knew, I'm standing, I'm at the altar in the Catholic Church. I wasn't happy. 2 weeks in, I remember laying in bed awake, thinking to myself, I got to get out of here. I don't want to be here. And I don't know if this is a situation where people would like, other people might, other people might make the best of it, or, give it the old college try and that kind of a thing. Says, and I just wasn't willing, so I would, says a little bit of that, I'm sure, has to do with my opinion of her, because it was one of those situations. I've talked about this in here before, that I found unacceptable. It was just freaking unacceptable. I was not going to accept it. And, since I didn't, I just didn't want to be there. All I wanted to do was leave. And, it didn't take long. And I also couldn't be the bad guy. So, since I made it impossible for her not to go find a lawyer and not to divorce me. I mean, that was, I wasn't going to be the bad guy. And I was going to let her, do all those stuff and be able to say afterwards, see what you did to me and all that kind of stuff, that indignant crap, and it was all bullshit. I mean, it was not the kind of thing that, I want to do. Anyway, so for the next few years, I had my place, and, I'd get my place and stuff like that, during all this time too, says most of the time, says I was in, I was in a band in Detroit, a rock and roll band, around Detroit somewhere, one of a few, I think. And, that, I don't know, that was one of the things where I wish that I had, I don't know. Let me put you this way. So, like, after I got clean, I didn't know how much I knew about stuff. I mean, I found out how much I knew, how really good at things I was. I found out how really good at, at playing my bass I was. I found out how really good of a design engineer I was. And I didn't even really consider those things. I don't know if I even saw them as assets, when I was, before I got clean. Yeah, says and most of this jabber jawing I'm going to do here is going to be in recovery. I've been in recovery since 1987, man. So it was, says that's kind of all I know. And says, and I put in a good effort after treatment, says I made it 3 years after treatment, before I relapsed. And I was, says I was really open to it at the time. So now I remember the day that, I let them sign me up for treatment. I was, since I'd been on this big, long crack binge, was it when I left work? I think it was when I left work. And I'd been on this crack binge, and I went to, says that I was out of money. I was out of everything, says, and I sat there and seriously considered hanging myself in the shower of this motel room. And I couldn't, I don't know, I couldn't find anything. I'm still buggy from the fucking crack, but I, says I seriously considered it, and then a knock at the door, housekeeping, and I open up the door, and it was a little Mexican woman, says, but at that freaking moment, I saw my kid's face, my kid who I have not seen in 6 or 8 weeks. I don't know. I would call him, and I would call him and cancel on the weekends, but I was, I'd tell him I was busy or something like that. And I don't know how much of that I really got away with, and he's only 5 at the time, so I don't know how much of that he remembers. I remember, oh, I do remember the last time that I had seen him, I had picked him up in this freaking $100 beater that I was driving around in. I pick him up and I forget, we're probably going to my mom's house because I wasn't going to take him where I lived. I was living in motel rooms. And when I took him, he was real disappointed one day, and kind of give me one word answers and those kinds of things. What's wrong, man? Says, you mad at me, buddy? And he looks at me and he says, you make promises you don't keep. That shit stung. So I used the that as an excuse, to go on the rest of my binge. But I ended up the day when I was sitting there thinking about killing myself. Now, granted, I know a lot of times, says we get down and out and stuff like that, and we will, says in my head, I would say, I want to kill myself. I want to kill myself. And then, thinking that I don't have any other way out. Well, when you hear it come out of your mouth, it's completely different, So like when I heard it come out of my mouth, I went to a hospital. I think it was the nearest hospital that I was at, and it was coincidentally, since my son is a coordinator over at that hospital right now, since he does quite well. He was a coordinator for the COVID, that kind of thing. The same son that I was talking about a minute ago. But I went into the hospital. At that time, it was the local mental health hospital, we'll call it. And I went in there, says, yeah, really depressed, and it's kind of says, I think I considered killing myself a little while ago. Da 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 da. He says, really, and then he started questioning me about says what kind of life I had, and I said. I said, well, says I make pretty good money, and no, says, and like if I ever get laid off or fired or quit or anything like that, I usually have a job like the next day. That's really the way it was in the 80s. I could literally be working the next day as well as living somewhere else. I could be working the next day too. I remember one girlfriend of mine saying, says I pulled a nooner one day, says that I decided I was going to quit that job, and then I was going to another one, and she said that just floors me. She says, I can't believe you already have another job, and it was, just, I was. It was noon on Thursday, and I had another job on Friday morning. So, so I was pretty lucky in that respect. I had a lot of things, and I know, man, I charmed myself into a lot of things. I was a spoiled fucker. I made more money than anybody that I knew that was earning money. I made more money than anybody else. And certainly didn't appreciate it. It was just bragging. It was material to brag about, that kind of a thing. Anyway, I went into this hospital, and this guy's questioned me about my life, and I said, when I was talking about making a lot of money, he says, really? He says, how much money do you make a week? And at the time, I think I made like $700 or $800 a week, and he says, really? He's, yeah. And he says, well, where's all your money go? I says, well, since I eat out all the time and I stay in, and I stay in hotels and that kind of crap. And he says, hold on. He says, like, I could stay in the finest hotels in the Detroit metro area and eat in the finest restaurants. and still not spend that much money in a week. He says, now where's your money going? It's, well, I guess I do a little bit of cocaine here and there. He says, oh, really? He says, well, I'll tell you what, says, you want to talk about suicide, says depression or anything like that. I says, here, I'm going to tell you what we do. He says, we got a bed up in Almont. It's a city about half hour, 45 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. He says, we have a bed up in our Almont facility that you can have today. He says, so basically we'll take care of the drug problem, and then we'll talk about, the suicide or anything like that. It says, but if not, you can just leave, and I had to sit there and make that decision at that moment, and this day happened to be a Friday. And so I said, okay, okay, we'll give this a try. And it was something I didn't really think I was going to take all that seriously. I also thought, at this time I used to think that, like, well, since I'll get clean and, maybe get my shit together a little bit and then I'll be able to use again. I didn't understand that it was it was this huge life change that I had to do. So I did. It says so. I did do that. Now, this is I think one of the magic things for me. One of the things that kind of propelled me over the next few years, and it was like it says. I had to stay with my mom and stepdad for the weekend, waiting for since before they could only get me in on Monday. And I went over my mom and stepdad's for, says, and I kind of came clean about a lot of stuff. We'd be sitting there watching, just watching TV, and I would get up and I would walk over and turn the TV off. And this is before they had the really good remotes and shit. We still had to turn the dial. In some places, but I'd get up and I'd turn the TV off and I'd say, remember the time that I was there were a few times when I pulled the wool over their eyes to get money out of them. And I told this is, and I just confessed all this stuff. Just so so I mean, it was the thing. So somebody else knew, I don't necessarily think I was going to be, I felt like I was going to be accountable to them at that time. I just felt like somebody else needed to know because I felt like I'd lived such a sham of a life. And it says, but anyway, I went through this whole weekend where I'm confessing all these things and everything like that. And I think by the end of the weekend, I looked my mom and stepdad both, it's like, no, don't turn the TV off and say anything more. I mean, so we just, they were good parents. They were, they loved me unconditionally. Says, and my real dad too, since I never did really understand how I never did really understand how I turned out the way I did just because I had these great parents, man, and anyway, so I went into treatment, and it was it was 28 days, and just before it's just like I don't know, it's just like before I went into the hotel room and all that stuff, I went out on a run with this guy that I knew. He used to live with my with my powder cocaine dealer, and we got in together, went on, just went on this freaking crack binge. And it was this one nasty night, since I pulled over and I think my car broke, my tire had blown or something like that, and I remember almost hitting a telephone pole and all this crazy stuff, and I got up and I got out and I went to leave. And this was a weird time because all of a sudden I would see these people. One of the guys that I work with right now, he says, I walked over to this gas station and I was trying to figure out how I was going to get from where I was to probably the hotel, the motel, whatever. And uh, I'm standing there, and there's a guy out there pumping gas, and it's a guy that I work with right now. He's just like, holy shit! Says, what are you doing out here? Says, and he used to work for me at that job that I'd walked away from. This is a short while back, and I sat in the car and I did the whole, it was weird too, because I kind of did the whole confessional thing in there too, and he looks at his buddy and he looks at his buddy and he says, snifferific. That's what they used to call cocaine, was snifferific. And, another victim. So anyway, they dropped me off for somewhere where I want, says that I wanted to be at the time. But then now I'm rolling around to when I walked out of treatment now. When I came out of treatment, the first thing I did, says they told me, says the first thing you do, the first night you're out, says go to a fucking meeting, and we didn't have the cell phone, electronics, or anything like that to do the meetings any other way, says they put a big emphasis on sponsorship and that kind of thing, right? So I get I get out of the meeting, says, and I go to this meeting, and it's a pretty big and I used to love my meetings when they're big and smoky and unmanageable, a lot of noise and everybody's hollering one meeting, because it's so loud. But we I went to the meeting there, so really, and I got out, and and I made a couple friends, or a couple acquaintances anyway, and I went to it says, and then I go kitty corner across the street, which is the same gas station that I was at, where I ran into this guy that I used to work with, right? Well, this time I ran into the guy that I went on the last run with, the guy that used to live with my dealer, and I'm like, holy shit, what are you doing? And he said, oh, nothing, this is a neat. And it's it's November, and it's sleet. I mean, it's cold and wet and miserable and everything like that. And there he is with no coat and no shoes. All right, in a sock feet, and he's, oh man, and he'd just gotten rolled. He was down trying to score, and I said, oh man, says, come on, I'll give you a ride. And pull out and I turn one way, like where I know he lives. And he says, no, I want to go. He wants me to take him down to cop, And I said, I can't do that. I just got out of treatment today, man. This is, it was a coincidence. It was it was a fucking Todd shot, man. It was that thing that really I really needed right coming out of treatment, where he says no. And I'll tell you what, says he would rather have gotten out of the car in his socks and no coat and go walk back down, says walk back down the half mile wherever it was to cop, than get a ride home to where it was warm. That put the fear of God in me, says I kind of I didn't, and I didn't put together the thing where, that I used to do, where I would choose to get high over taking care of my responsibilities. I didn't put that connection there together until probably until, I don't know, I think maybe, since I was a few weeks ago, when I really thought of that concept. I didn't it's not an original thought by any means. It's just one of those things that I finally put together in my head, and it took me 35 years to do that, I guess. Anyways, so seeing that kind of straightened me out. And, um, for the next few months, I was at a meeting every single night, and I looked at these people in the meetings and stuff like that as kind of protection or a shelter that I would run to get away from the other people that I knew, So there were so many people that just like, these um, little tiny bits of, wisdom that you get from people in the program. Um, I remember one gal telling me about her last experience using, I think she had just gotten a year when I came in, and she was telling me, she says, the thing that happened to her, says she was on Antabuse, all right, and then she smoked crack, all right, but when she smoked crack, she used the alcohol. She used the alcohol to light it, and she went and went into an awful seizure, and she was in the hospital for a week or something like that, just from that one seizure. But says it messed her up pretty good. But she was doing well, she was healthy and all that kind of stuff. And it was she had lots of little bits of wisdom. She was the one who used to tell me, says, like, when I would sit there and talk about my flighty mind and me thinking, says, and all I could think about at the time was dope, 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 dope. I want to use, I want to use, I want to use, I don't want to use, I want to use, I don't want to use, and she, she's, she was the one who tells you, says, look, it's just a thought. It's just a thought. And those words, they don't seem to have the impact that they did. I mean, when she said them to me on that particular day, at that particular time, when I was going through what I was going through, man, that was gold. That was so much gold where, where I don't know. It was like she informed me that it was just a thought, when in reality it was um, in reality, it was like basically the way I had to live for the next little phase of my life, right? Um, and it did. The idea that, so I think about her telling me it's just a thought. I think about that, says 10 times a day, till came, I think that was the tool that got me through to the point where I had a day where I realized I was like, wow, I didn't think about drugs or drinking at all today. It was just, it was a great last thought to have at the end of the day. Um, yeah, it says, my really close friend that I had, that I'd gotten, somewhere in my first year of recovery. Um, well, I don't know. I remember getting the same, he and I had the same day of the month, whatever, that clean date. And this was about 90 days in. And he says that I think at that time, he had, when I had 90 days, he had, 120 days, something like that. So we were within, he was about 30 days ahead of me. And, and that seemed like a lot, man. I don't know why at that time when, you're just fresh in recovery like that, that extra 30 days that he had, like for some reason, since I looked at him and he was so much further ahead than me, and, was, I don't know, since since in our lives both kind of intermingled throughout the next few years, and um, then in 1990, um, I don't recall exactly, but I guess I thought I was going to drink like a gentleman and that kind of stuff, and so I'd started to develop this over a month or so, I started to develop this little, I'd frequent these bars and stuff like that. And, and here, I'm going to tell you this again, like I've told you before, says like, says I used to drink a lot, so says I probably could be considered an alcoholic, I'm sure, whatever, addict is the all encompassing word. But, like, when I drank, says it was as if, not as if I picked up where I left off. It as if I had been drinking the whole time, for those whole 3 years that I was off. It didn't feel like I had ever missed a beat the way it felt, and it was unpleasant as hell. I mean, it was just like, says you drink one. I drink one beer and I was drunk, and I was just this fucking negative drunk from then on. I didn't like the way the alcohol made me feel at all or anything like that. And so in the meantime, my buddy Glenn is doing the same thing. This is the buddy that I gathered from recovery. My buddy Glenn's doing the same thing. We didn't really do it together or anything like that, and it was always a weird thing. After you've been in recovery, seeing somebody that from recovery in the bar or something like that, or worse yet, says seeing somebody that on the outside, or that you used to use or something like that, come into recovery. Says you don't, those friendships really don't, I don't know, they feel weird. They're just weird. So anyways, Glenn and I we're both doing the same thing. Finally, we just say, hey, let's go out and have a drink. Yeah, that's a good idea. And so, we're sitting at the, says I usually tell the story kind of, without the prelude to it. And I say, says we're sitting there and and Glenn says, you know what? He says, NA had a good, says it had its place in my life. It says it got, says it got me clean, got my shit together. And now I'm out here living my life, we're sitting there having this conversation in a bar, right? And we knew better. We both knew better. And that night ended up at the crack house. All right. I hadn't been to one yet, but that night it ended up at the crack house. And earlier this evening, since we were talking about, says alcohol was never my thing, so maybe I'll do that, says, but the thing is that creates that KY jelly covered slope, man. That shit is that stuff. It says like it's way more. It says I will make the wrong decision, almost definitely almost every time if I've started using anything. So those are little lessons that I've learned, in recovery. Oh, you know what? I'll tell you one of the things that also happened in 1990 was that was the year that I did the, since I did the, I absconded the treasury from from one of my groups, since and I was the treasurer at this group, and I don't know, it's one of those things. There's a little pride thing that goes along with, and pride's the silent killer, by the way. It was one of those pride things, this is where I was the treasurer of this group, and they entrusted me, and they insisted I, take care of us and take care of our finances, da da da. Yes, I will save you. So when I says says I'd gone a relapse, and I don't know, I probably spent all my money. And I went into the treasury money, says, and I relapsed with the treasury money too. And it was a little more than a week till the meeting, and I had to fess up that, since I relapsed and I used the treasury money. He says, but I gave their money back immediately, says I took that right off the top of my next pay and all that kind of stuff. and I gave their money back and everything like that, and had to apologize and um, get humble. And then so we're sitting, and I do all this stuff at a business meeting, everything like that, and I can see these, and and I know a little bit of this was my manipulation, so it's my charm, I like to call it. I sat there, it says, and I made sure the words that I used, and it says my body language and everything, it says just would just absorb any pity and sympathy that these people had for me, And I see one of the my friend Karen raises her hand. She says, "How long do you have clean?" I said 9 days, and she says, "I make a motion to waive the clean time requirement to 9 days." You're supposed to have at least 2 years for these positions, right? And then, no, please. And everybody fell in line, and they insisted that I take the money again. And I didn't really want it. And since I put out all my efforts, says part of it was, says like, I didn't want that responsibility that made me feel like such a big man before, I didn't want that anymore hanging on me when I'm just trying to get clean again, you know. And it's not like we says we slip and we get right back on our feet. It's always a big setback when I pick up again. It was always this big, huge, um, this obstacle for me. Says when I use this in like, um, you know, getting clean, like really getting clean, probably took me a year. To really, really get clean and get out of the alcoholic addict mindset. Um, I says, and so so I finally found somebody else to do the treasurer thing, and I figured it was a good candidate, and he says, here, trust him, man, don't trust me. And says, and since I got that off my back, there was no way that I could have done that. I mean, I couldn't um, carry that responsibility. I couldn't even guarantee that I was going to show up to the meeting every week, or when I, or at least the meetings that I was supposed to be at. So I don't know. I think, and you know what though, says as at that time, says I was probably doing, says 3 to 5 meetings a week and stuff like that. But I did I did when I finally buckled down again, since I finally did do another 90 and 90, and and it's like so I've told some of you guys before, it's just like, we say 90 meetings in 90 days. It's not the 90 meetings, man. Can't go to 3 meetings a day, and get it all done. They get it over with in a week. Says it's the 90 days, that time. And, I don't know, there's something to be said in recovery, the time and the experience. And when I say experience, I mean, going through things that, that you need to go, so it's going through the things, going through the motions of living sober, on a regular basis. That is, that's the time factor right there. That's how that all figures in. And there's not a wow. Believe it or not, I am tired of hearing myself talk, but I'll go for a little bit more. But there, says that's the thing. Says when, says when I realized that, how that time makes the difference. Says like getting through that. Says like I need to get back to a point back to the point where, since I was, a few years ago, where I find, since I had it because it was months that I went through. I was still thinking about drugs and alcohol, drugs and alcohol, and and white knuckling, not using, and that kind of a thing, and not getting honest about it at meetings or with my sponsor or with the people that I'm close to. You know, my relationship with Glenn at that point changed forever. Since we were never friends, we were never on the same wavelength or anything like that, and we both played in bands, so we had that in common, and we used to jam together and that kind of thing. We just didn't do it. I didn't want to do it. I didn't feel safe in that process, and I don't mean that. Um, when I say safe, I mean that I didn't trust myself not to do things, because like when you use with someone, I'm sorry, that's going to be part of the whole atmosphere when you're around that person. Mm, my second wife, um, we met in the program, that kind of things, is in uh says, and I was with her when I relapsed. This is like 7 years after the last relapse that I was just talking about. This is about 7 years later, and I relapsed, and um, from that moment on, it says, and she relapsed just shortly thereafter too, as well. And I take that back. She relapsed before me, but of course, I use that as an excuse. But the thing is like, I don't know why the drugs and the alcohol seem to poison a relationship, or if it's in there somewhere. It says that's all I think about when I can't be around my second wife for too much longer, like 20 minutes, and it says I might not think specifically that about drugs, but um, says I have some kind of stinking thinking, if you will, when I'm around here for too long, says, and not her fault, not her at all, I mean, I consider my marriage to her as probably one of the great loves of my life. Uh, I'm not real good at that stuff, so I didn't. Um, I know we kind of dragged each other through the mud a lot, and we've come together as friends since then a few times. But I can't keep my composure very well around her. All right, I don't know what that is or why or anything like that. Um, when I was, since when I was clean and sober, since I had my son in 92, I had my daughter in 95, and um, they've always been around recovery. Um, my daughter is a lot like me, so you could probably guess my daughter is an addict. She's with child right now, so she's clean, I'm sure, and I think she'll be pretty good. She's struggled with it for quite a bit, and this last time that she had a problem with it, she got pulled over and got a DUI, and this was just before she found out she was pregnant, or just before she got pregnant. And she says, well, I think it's safe to say I'm an addict. I guess so. Um, I feel bad for her too, with weed legal and all that kind of crap. She was quite the connoisseur at one time. And I felt bad because, it's just like I say, whenever we use, whenever we use drugs in one form or another, since we release our addiction all over again, it's a slippery slope to what we want to use, you know. And I don't know. Uh, it's just like, think my generation, is as far as my family goes, my generation, pretty plagued with addiction. I don't really count my sisters. My sisters are way older than me. They didn't even live at the house when, when I can remember. So I don't ever remember living with them. Um, and but says my part of the generation, the next May generation, since we pretty much muddied up the waters with, with drugs and alcohol. Try and think of something entertaining to talk about. I mean, I got to tell you, says this is what I love is when I told you this is before I went into treatment. I'd walked away from this job this is basically during my lunch hour, my midnight lunch hour, one night. And so I left there and, as I started to get into program and that kind of thing, a few months later, um, I call. It was really when things were starting to turn for me, probably a month after I got out of treatment. So I probably been clean close to 60 days. And I said, it's just I could try and call my old boss back, and just to say I'm sorry. I didn't really want that job, I knew that it felt like it was one of those things just like that job that felt like, it was one of those things that was polluted by the drugs and alcohol. It just wasn't going to be this, it was kind of a party spot, or it induced my thinking to the drugs and alcohol. Anyway, so I called my old boss back, and I said, listen, since I really want to apologize for leaving you in the lurch like that, says I hope you found resources to get the work that I was doing, taken care of and all that kind of thing, and I go on and on and on. This is, and I don't know, I probably spoke for, a minute and a half or 2 minutes or something like that with this drolling apology, says I made sure I included everything that I had done, that where I had disrespected the job that he gave me, and finally he interrupts me. He says, never mind that, we need a man of your caliber to run our night shift, and I think, oh my God, and just like the just like the treasury at the meeting a few years later, it's just like this stuff just gets handed back to me, and I'm glad I don't want it. That's all. I don't know, I just got to say I'm glad I don't want it. um I know, I already know what it tastes like, let's put it that way, or I already know what it feels like. So um I got that right. So now I can't tell you where that came from or anything like that. I know that, um, had I not had recovery in my life, that both those things, the job and the treasury and all that kind of thing, I'd have taken them. You know, I'd have taken them. I said, and thought that I deserved them. I bet. You know, I don't know. Says um, says I'm not a glutton for punishment or punishing myself or anything like that. I just um I understand in a lot of areas I'm fucking lucky. I'm really, really lucky. Um Things could go my way. It says, however, there's a way to do those things with a little bit more integrity, right? I'm gonna cough. Okay. I got it. Okay. Everybody's got to learn American Sign Language in here now. And next week we're gonna have a meeting where everybody's on mute. All right. Um, well, yeah, since I don't know, this is what I feel is, says what I don't know what I feel. I just guess I just felt like a lot of these things, uh, you know, have kind of given me hints that like um, I think a lot of my one of the things that I'm conscious of now is that I can and I think I naturally want to live a life with some kind of integrity. Um, I didn't always want that. Uh, as a matter of fact, since I found my personal integrity to be an obstacle at times, where wouldn't allow me to be a good criminal. How's that? Um, and I wish I could emphasize to you guys though. So it's like, um, it's just, you gotta know. I hear and hear so many times it's like stuff, from some of the people that are newer in recovery and stuff like that, and I just roll my fucking eyes. It's like, shit, I thought of that. you know, it don't work. And you can't just say it. I mean, there's the thing about, so there's the time, and there's your experience right there. These are the things that they can't be taught. They can only be learned, right? And so that's where experience comes in, says where you have to go through these things, and says anything like after a breakup or after anything major, after a breakup or a divorce or something like that, or maybe a death of somebody close to you, something like that, where, says you feel a lot of loss and a lot of pain. And when we put down the drugs and alcohol, I recommend, you go through that whole year, you go through your birthday, basically alone or without the, without that thing that you leaned on or you held on to. You go through your birthday and the holidays and the family gatherings and all those kinds of things, to get some kind of a footing on you that doesn't depend on something or somebody else. Um, it's imperative. I mean, it's really one of those things that, like, okay, if you don't learn it this time around, says you'll learn it next time around, and trust me, there will be a next time. Um, yeah, and then so let me talk a little bit about Dopey. Says I'm not a real good one to talk about it. Says I mean I love this place, and I love I love Dave and 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 all the stuff I get out of the podcast. And, this is Dave and I talk a couple times a year, maybe, I don't know, something like that. But I'm not the best person to ask anything about that. Like, I really don't have that, the devotion that everybody else has to it. This is like, I don't know how to say this, this is like, a lot of times, since we hear these ideas about, um, still using substances. I understand, the mental illnesses and the, says in the, um, the mats and all those kinds of things. I understand a little bit, for that kind of stuff. But since I have a hard time talking to people about, that are still, they're still using the substances, and seeing that as their answer, this is where I want to say, no, that is not your answer. Says your recovery over here, says this, the goal to be sober and all those kinds of things. That is, the thing that you need to look at and focus on, says, because I'm, says if I'm using methadone or Suboxone or something like that, there is a point where I am looking to that to get me through my day. I'm looking at that to get me through my day, this is to where I would hope that you'd want to get to a point to where, the meeting that you're going to tonight is going to get you through your day. And I know it sounds, I don't know what the fucking word is, but I know that it sounds weird and corny or, oh, look, there's Deborah, one of my favorite people in the whole world. Good to see you. I don't, says it says a lot of times I can't help but sound corny or something like that. It says, but like, trust me, down the road, a piece says, you'll see, says, if you don't understand like what I'm saying or the way I'm saying, or if it sounds stupid and corny, all that thing right now, down the road, you'll see, says you will have these experiences over and over and over again until you kind of get through it. That's the way, says, I mean, it's like, I hear a lot of you guys talking about trauma, and that trauma, says until you face that trauma, says, like Steph says, the only way out is through until you face that trauma, and deal with it, says, and maybe get some therapy about it, that kind of a thing. Says it's impossible for you to move on. You're going to keep coming around to it and keep coming around to it. It's always going to be that freaking rock you're trying to push up, that boulder you're trying to push up the hill there. It's going to keep rolling back. And, I wish you all well. Anybody that's going through that, says I know a couple of vets that come to the meeting that I do on that I do on Saturday afternoons sometimes. Really going through it, really, really going through it. Can't really talk about it, at meetings or something like that, something like this. But this, one guy saying, says, this keeps me clean, says therapy keeps me sane. And and like just barely. He's like, I've hardly scratched the surface on the stuff that he's been through. And I think that there's a certain I don't know, what do you call it? There's a certain it's like a club, like people I can't really know, since I don't think that I've ever had that kind of trauma, embarrassment and humiliation. That was my trauma, and listen, I know it's gentle, I'm a spoiled child, I understand this fact, I'm I'm good at being a spoiled child, but I think that there's a certain I don't know. There's a certain club that says that these people belong in. This is where they can look at each other, and just kind of nod at what they've gone through, and I feel like that. I'd like to be able to, so to help people like that in some way, shape, or form. But I don't feel like there. I don't feel like that. I don't feel like there's a. Says I don't feel like that there's just like addiction. I don't feel like that there's a one standard answer to all that kind of stuff. I think those people have to go on their own path, and sometimes I'm afraid to offer up help or anything like that. Says I can listen in once in a while, I know I'm going to hear some things that are going to make me uncomfortable, and I can listen to that. It says, but I rarely dare, I daresn't respond, just because I don't know, it says once in a while you're talking a language that, they're talking a different language than I can understand. I don't know. I'll try to wind down here. I was in the I was in a meeting the other night, and Wednesday night, and it's in a shelter, says, and we were commenting about, like, we can't believe how many people are in here because of drugs and alcohol. All right. They're here in a homeless shelter because of drugs and alcohol, yet don't think they have a problem. You know, they could, there's nothing you can say, I can't, and I know, I mean, it's in everybody's time, this is like all that stuff, like being introduced, being open to it, so this is going to take a certain amount of you know, it's going to take more of a nutcracker than just me talking at them. I know that, right? But, I really feel like, um, I don't know. I really feel like my Wednesday meeting, even though there's rarely more than one or two addicts that actually come in, um, and sometimes they come in from the outside as opposed to from the shelter. But so there's myself and one other guy, and then we get a couple in there. I feel something about being available, you know, in a time when these people are like really vulnerable and really confused about what they're going through. Um, I kind of like that. This is where I'm just available, not anything, says I'm not going to talk about anything that I do. I don't do anything special or um, uh, honorable, by any means, but I love being there, being available, And there's one thing I'll say about, I've said about service here the last couple of weeks is like I can't tell somebody that, maybe they'll be grateful for the help or, so there's something that I've said or something like that, maybe not, whatever. But when I am I guess just available there to help, and I can offer a little bit of something or say something, says maybe it makes them mad, and they'll, says, and they'll come back. Says, I'll show that fucker, and they'll come back next week. Um, says, there we go. Says, then I don't know. I get more out of that than than the person that you're doing service to for, not to. Yeah, I haven't serviced anybody in recovery yet. It's there's always possibilities, right? But anyway, yeah. So you know what, you guys, like the goal is like to be available and be willing to help, so it's everybody you come in contact with, even if you hate them, man, just want the best for them, you know. He says, it's just like, I don't know if I'm going to love them until they can love themselves. I'm just going to, says, but I want them to be happy. You know, says, I want you all to be happy. And God, am I sick of hearing myself talk. So I think I'm done. Stay strong, Dopey Nation.